Welcome to your Monday Mindset Moment. I'm your host, the founder and lead coach at Raising Our Resilience, and I'm excited to be here with you today on this Monday. We have this series, Monday Mindset Moments, in order for you to drop in once a week with me as often as possible, usually about close to 50 weeks of the year, to just get a little tip to grab onto and try next with your family, with your children. And I'm so excited about this particular topic. We're going to be talking about identifying and addressing triggers and also how to anticipate them and get ahead of them. And when we talk about triggers, we're talking about big emotional moments where there's an event and our children have a strong emotional response. And usually when we talk about triggers, we tend to be talking about things that maybe have a history. And so we're going to talk about updating our perception of these triggers and even curbing their impact on us so we're more resilient. As you can tell from the title, Raising Our Resilience, our company name, we're all about helping families become more healthy and resilient together, parents and children alongside each other and caregivers. So we're so glad you're in. Say hello if you're here on Facebook. Just say hi so we know you're here. You can tell there's somebody watching, but we don't know who you are unless you say hello. Here on Zoom, it will be possible for you to also drop a question in the chat and get any support you'd like there as well. So please go ahead and use that chat feature. We've got Sage, Kirsten, and Emily here on Zoom. Welcome. So good. So glad to have you here. Okay, so when we're looking at this topic, one thing we really need to understand is the science of emotion in terms of the episodal timeline of how an emotion plays out. And we're going to just focus on the first part of like what actually contributes to what we now call a trigger. And this is based off of, by the way, many decades of research coming out of the Ekman Science of Emotion Lab. And this particular resource from the Atlas of Emotions was also endorsed by the Dalai Lama, because it was a collaboration to say, like, if we were to improve the state of humanity, if there's one thing we could focus on, it would be to understand our emotional landscape and be able to navigate it, not just for parents and caregivers, but and children, but all humans. So I'm going to go ahead and share up my screen and show you a little part of the diagram that really helps us to understand, what are we dealing with when we have a trigger? So here we go. All right. Oh, this is a different slide. Here we go. This is the one I want. So the science of emotion. So when we are talking about a trigger, we're talking about three parts coming together. And we're going to talk even more about preconditions in a moment. But the precondition idea is that before you arrive in that moment where the emotion comes up and you're having this experience of a trigger, things happen first, right? Maybe, and your body is in a certain state or condition, and your mind and your heart. That could be that you're tired or you have a lot of extra energy. You could be hungry or really full or satisfied. You could have just listened to some really sad music or heard some sad news, or you could be in anticipation of something exciting and your engine's really revving up. For the precondition matters. It has a huge impact on how we then perceive and respond physiologically and psychologically to an event. So that's the one part. The next part is the event itself. And that can be any kind of stimulus from your environment. So there's something that happens. You get a phone call from somebody who's angry with you. For a child, maybe they see something spooky, like a spider crawling across their pillow. Maybe it's more social, like for the kids, they're on the playground and they feel like they're being left out. Whatever that event is, it combines with the precondition and goes through basically a perception database. And this is a very quick process. It's instantaneous, mostly automatic, where whatever past experiences you're bringing to the table will help you to try to make sense of what this event really means and whether you're safe and whether you're in danger, whether you should be excited or you should be scared, all these different reactions we have. So these come together, precondition the event and the perception database to create what we now call a trigger. So here's an example. Child just felt left out on the yard and then comes into the classroom and the teacher doesn't call on them first. I've been there. I've taught for 15 years in the classroom and helped many teachers that have been my trainees and interns to navigate big emotions of children, as you can imagine, with 12, 24, 36, 48 kids. It's an hourly occurrence at the minimum. So anyway, so the child comes in, right? And doesn't get called on first and that's a trigger for them. The event itself, not getting called on, maybe would bring up mild disappointment. But the precondition of having felt left out on the yard, and then maybe their perception database around, they've had a few experiences now of being disappointed, not being called on first, or they feel like they're never called on. It's been a while since they've been called on. So their perception is that maybe this teacher is never going to call on me. And then you have a melting down child, like the picture here, who is so upset that she's turning away from the lesson. She's got her head down. She looks like she's about to cry. And she's saying things to herself like, I never get called on. It's important to acknowledge the pieces that come together as a part of being able to anticipate and also address triggers when they arise. Can you see the value in this? Now, what I want you to do is think about the last time your child encountered something that was an event that most likely triggered them. And I want you to think about not only what was that trigger, which is going to be something that you're going to be helping them understand what things trigger me, why, those kinds of things, but just think about like, okay, what happened? But now I want you to think about what were the preconditions that may have led to this trigger. And I want you to, let's look at this one. I want you to think about if maybe they were hungry, angry, lonely, or tired as a place to start, or maybe they were overwhelmed by stimulation. There's a lot going on. Or maybe there was something that was happening, like a pattern that day that was already like building up in them. And that's part of the anger, right? Like this child was already ready to be frustrated and annoyed that she didn't get called on because she was already feeling frustrated and annoyed at her friends and maybe even sad and left out. So I want you to think back to the last time that your child had a big emotion where there was a trigger involved. What happened? I'm going to slide back to 2 slides here so you can see what happened. What was the event? What could the possible precondition or preconditions, there's going to be several, that may have contributed to their big reaction or their big emotional response? And what, if anything, could be in their perception database? And I like to think of this like Brene Brown explains. What are the stories that we're telling about this event? Like the story that this child has, for example, is I never get called on. I never get chosen. I don't get picked to play the game, right? I'm never the one being preferred, right? And that's a story that is building in her mind that contributes to her emotional and psychological and physical response, right? Of shutting down, getting angry, getting sad, starting to cry. So in the chat, if you're here with me, just as an exercise, it's really helpful to actually do some work here in this moment. And by the way, I have Kat, Sarah, Emily, all here for more. We did a big 3-day weekend on this as clients in the year-long immersion program. Doors reopen in July, if that's something you're interested in, other folks who are listening. But right now our doors are closed and we're rocking it. It's an amazing group. Anyways, so we went deeper on this, right, y'all? So if you could in the chat, help me out, write a sentence of what happened, what precondition could be in play, and what story your child might have been telling about it. All of this is really important because if you miss out on one of the pieces, first of all, you're likely to get it wrong about what your child needs from you now. What perception needs to be updated, for example, or what was already in play. Like we can even get upset at our kids for what we consider an overreaction if we don't consider the preconditions. And then we have less sense, like this feels like chaos coming at us too, or like, where did this come from? So go ahead and take a moment in the chat here on Zoom or on the Facebook group and just write down what happened, what possible preconditions could be in play, and what story could your child be making to try to make meaning of this experience and their big emotion that came up. Now, when you practice this, if you even don't get to do it during this live session, at least write down those prompts for yourself. This is what we build into what we call a resilience plan in our work in the immersion. So clients, just keeping that in mind. When we have awareness around this, then we can also help our children become aware. Now, in the moment is not always the best time to try to update their perception database fully and get to the root of things, right? It may not be the time to say, well, you're just feeling this way because you were already tired. you can try those things. And sometimes it's enough for them to go, oh, no wonder I feel this way. We can do that with ourselves too. But what you might want to do is really find some way to help them get their mind away and their body, even their perception away from the trigger, to kind of get a chance to reset their nervous system and then do that good work. And we call that putting your lid back on in our work, don't we? Kat, Emily, and Sarah. All right, so I did want to address this, that then the next thing you can do, and I'm gonna get to the comments in just a second here. Great start, y'all. Let's keep them rolling in. The next thing you can do is then you can help the kids recognize what events trigger them. And this is helpful in anticipating the next time you're in a situation. So you can do things like preview for them. Okay, we're going to go check out that dusty corner of the of the house. And last time we saw a spider there. Now I want you to know we're going to bring a glass and a paper with us so that we can trap it if we need to. And you can stand right behind me and I'll check for the spider first. You know, just little things like, because seeing a spider surprise is a trigger for them, turns out. And this corner now is something they're not sure about. For example, I used to have even a client of a 12-year-old who didn't like to go in the garage by herself because of the cobwebs that were there. So this is not just for 2-year-olds, everybody. This is even for adults, okay? And teens and tweens. Maybe it's that the last time they went to the park, it was overwhelmingly loud. And you can just kind of generalize too, to like, oh, loud situations. This is something that my child is sensitive to, especially if you see a pattern. So you can help them anticipate there's going to be a loud situation. And we'll talk more about how we can update their perception database on that one. On the bottom left, maybe they're feeling left out, like there's a group that's kind of clicking together. They're not quite in the group, or they haven't yet broken into it. A group they used to be in is now kind of pushing them out. So any kind of exclusion feeling, not being included, could be a trigger for them. And what a human thing, right? All of these examples, helping them recognize that. It's like, geez, sweetie, you know, like when you feel left out, it can really hurt your heart. And so you can anticipate, is this a situation where you have a friend there, or is this maybe one where you're going to feel a little bit on the outside? And then you can start talking about what you can do about that. Last but not least on this is like, there's a high stakes pressure situation academically. Maybe there's a test, or there's some kind of performance they have to do, a report, and maybe they can start to recognize their academic stress. Awareness is the first step, because without the awareness of what triggers them, it's really difficult to then have the conversation about things like preconditions and perception database updates without that awareness. And that's what the main takeaway I have for you today, really. Key number one is bring in the awareness of the perception database, the preconditions, and the events that trigger your children. That's your 1, 2, 3, okay? Awareness. Now, how do we actively update our perception database and adjust preconditions? There's several ways. First is having language for it, right? So the awareness, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, for overwhelmed maybe. Or maybe there's like a basic need that's not being met here. And I always say, when we read the need behind a child's behavior, we can address the root of it and help them become even more resilient and sturdy, right? And be supportive of them. So having kids take a little stock, a little check-in. Am I hungry? Am I lonely? Am I tired? Am I overwhelmed? That's going to be incredibly helpful, so that they can then put their lid back on and figure out what they need behind this big emotion. There may be a need. So that's one thing. The other thing you can do besides have conversations is you can start to recognize, wow, you know, this part of the day in the afternoon, after school, before dinner, my child tends to have a difficult time with sort of 5 things, you know, and you start to see patterns like that. Like they didn't get the snack they want. They didn't get to sit in the chair before their sibling. You didn't give them the second treat they wanted. You said no to screen time. And even though that's normal, they never get screen time that time of day. It's a big deal all over again. You start to see patterns like that. You can start to think, wow, what can I do about the routines and helping my child get on board with the routines, and where do we need to make adjustments to the routine? Like maybe we need a snack in the car. So before we're even home, we have an opportunity to get some calories in this kid. Maybe we need some downtime. Maybe we need to preview a quiet hour when we get home and really pick activities that we love. There's all these ways you can really work with on the routines. And that's what we do January and July and all throughout the year of our immersion program. For a reason, we start the semester with routines, because there's so much problem solving we can do around preconditions within the routine. And sometimes it's not hungry and tired only. It can be lonely. Maybe they've missed you all day And even though what you want to do when you get in the door is put the groceries away and get the dishes going and all these things, they might need you to just drop in and read a book with them first and connect up with them because they're feeling lonely and missing you. So there's a lot of good problem solving you can do, and then you can build that into the routine, and then it kind of runs itself, and you've gotten ahead and addressed, even anticipated some of these triggers and reduce them. And what a good thing for everybody. Now, the other thing you can do is help them make updates to their perception database. So this is after the lid is back on, or you can do a little bit to try and see if it helps put their lid back on. Like, it's okay, that's a friendly spider. It doesn't bite unless it's really scared. So why don't we just move away, and I'll very gently move it outside, and you can show them how you do it. So that could be a perception database moment of like an update of like, oh, when there's a spider, there's something we can do. And I just saw my mom do it and it's okay. I'll be okay. Or maybe when there's a test, you can say like, wow, how about we really think about how we can get you ready? Like, maybe would you like to practice some of the problems together? Would that make you help you feel more ready, more prepared? So you might like focus on preparedness. You might say, well, I know that, getting a good night's sleep can make a really big difference. What can we do to help you kind of calm down? Can we wake up early in the morning and review real quick before you go to work or go to school? Kind of bringing in some tools. And just letting them know, like, yeah, I mean, you're feeling pressure to get good grades here. And maybe the story they're telling themselves is, if I don't get good grades, I'm in trouble. You could also reassure them, hey, sweetie, as long as I see you making your best effort and you're, trying your best, I'm going to be proud of you no matter what your scores are and your grade are. And if you get a bad score or score you don't like, that's a starting off point. Now we have some clues about what to study next. And that's totally fine. Like, updating that you're going to they'll still have love and belonging with you. You'll still be proud no matter what their score is. That can be helpful. Things like that. So we're going to update their perception database. Yeah. And one way you can do that, again, is just like help update the stories that they are telling themselves or about this event or experience, and then give them experiences that back it up. So maybe going to the park when it's quieter. If the park was super loud and that was overwhelming last time, you can bring a picnic blanket and go to a quiet corner of the park, and all that busyness is happening way over there. And now they have a quiet home base they can come back to. Maybe with the inclusion piece, we've already talked about the spider and the test. So maybe with the inclusion piece, you give them some way, this is kind of a silly little illustration, but I love it. Give them some way that they can model inclusivity. Like, maybe they make a little card for everyone in their classroom and they hand them out. And they just have this way of being like, I'm friends with everybody, and kind of reopening some doors, or maybe even repairing some mistakes and smoothing some things over that's causing the exclusion. You can always work with other caregivers too, to collaborate on an updating perception database. And then at the end of the day, if there's something that just needs to be addressed, you can be an advocate for your child's needs. And you'll be able to do that even better if you can, again, let me just fly back to this slide. If you can say what the event, name the event, name the precondition, and say the story that your child is telling themselves to the other caregivers, help the kids say that. Because imagine a child, this is what my stepson did, by the way, when he went to college. He practiced this a lot, especially with his ADHD and his attentional needs around learning. He went straight up to his college professor's freshman year, I kid you not, and he goes, listen, when I'm in class and there's a lot of lecture going on, that's the event, right? I tend to get overwhelmed and not able to follow unless I'm able to ask questions, right? So I sometimes feel like I'm a bad student if I'm not able to follow perception database. But what's true for me, new story, is that I actually just need a chance to raise my hand and ask questions and sit in the front row. Okay, so preconditions he's in charge of is getting enough rest, eating enough breakfast, those kinds of things. But for the professor, he wants to know, can I sit so he'd ask, can I sit in the front and raise my hand and ask a lot of questions? Is that I need to do that. Is that going to be a problem for you? Is this going to work? And most of the professors were like, wow, yeah, game on, let's do this. Some of them were like, actually, I don't, my need over here is to lecture straight through and take questions at the end. Let me find you a better section that will meet your needs better, or let's get you a note taker, right? Working with him. So this is where this leads to. Children can advocate for themselves. You can advocate for them. Other caregivers can be aware of their needs. And over time, this perception database gets updated as much as possible so that the child is less triggered. Now, that doesn't mean that they're now pacified and they're no longer, or they're complicit and no longer going to advocate for themselves. Actually, the opposite is true. Sometimes we think that if we're If we are the ones taking responsibility for our triggers, then we're not actually asking what we need of the environment. And that's not what I'm advocating for here. What I'm advocating for is actually more awareness, more articulation, more communication, and more advocacy. And it's so possible and very exciting. Okay, so a couple of examples in the chat. Thank you, Kat. Thank you, Sage. This is great. So Kat says, the fight to go to bed is the event. Preconditions, lots of energy that needed to get out. And the perception databases, I would say I didn't get enough time with daddy, right? Like wanting more time with daddy. So what we might look at is, and we've talked about this, right? About routines, waste, the precondition is the easiest low-hanging fruit. Let's get that energy out as much as possible. And then I would say build in some ways to down regulate, to like then bring the energy down. And just in our training this month, right, we did last week, that body scan where you tense and release, and you kind of do it, you hold and you release and you hold the calm part too, actually helps to bring that nervous system down. So you can maybe practice that, and maybe because he's young, you know, you might squeeze his body with him and then he lets go like a wet noodle. You can make some kind of analogy like that. Tense and release, silent screaming, she's mentioning. Yes, good. And then you want to get him to a place where he can show you he's ready. And maybe part of the routine is building this in to do the tense and release with the daddy as much as possible so that he gets that time built in too. And then if you need to do a handoff, it's in this way that he's very reassuring about the next time they're going to hang out, and that, you know, it's only going to be for, you know, first thing in the morning, they can reconnect, and really help him anticipate that I will get more time with daddy, and make a little appointment with him. Yeah, good. Okay. I see. Thumbs up from Kat. So that must have been helpful. Good. Okay. We'll keep refining and moving forward with this. I'm so glad you're back to see this again, because, you know, you really can't see this enough times. I swear, even me, every time I look at it, I'm like, oh, right. Let's get this imprinted in my memory. So Sage says, marble run got destroyed while doing something parents asked of him. That was the event. Precondition, maybe you're always forcing me to stop what I'm doing or interrupting me. That's definitely the story. I would say that's in the database. A precondition, Sage, might be something like he's actually been ignoring the fact that he's hungry and thirsty and needing to go to the bathroom because he's so focused on building his marble run. And so all of a sudden, like now he's like under-resourced. He's thirsty, he's holding his pee, and needs a snack. And then when this happens, he's being asked to not only get pulled away from what he's focusing on, but also to do something you want him to do when really there's something else that his body wants him to do next. So that's an example of a precondition. Maybe 1, 2, or 3 of those, depending, you know, what some combination. Or maybe he's kind of lonely and he's actually just been playing by himself. And when you come in and you want him to do something, instead of saying, wow, look at your marble run, what are you working on? And kind of connecting before you make a request. I say connecting before directing or correcting. So connecting with him might have really helped with that too. And maybe giving him some transition time could be helpful, because maybe there's this perception database of you're always interrupting me, which is really different from you're always asking me kindly while showing interest with a plenty of heads up of 5 whole minutes to finish what I'm doing for me to do something for you. You see the difference? That could be an update of the story. Like, oh, my mom's really interested in my craft or my project. She really values it. She understands that it's hard to separate from it and do something else and transition. And she's helping me figure out a way that can go more smoothly. Those would be the great perception, or the perception database updates, right? Also that I will get back to this project. It will still be there for me. There's a way that I can protect it by putting a little, like, I don't know, one of those little cardboard, like maybe a cardboard box that you cut and make a little like shield for it. So it's like, maybe you can write do not touch on it. So it's protected, you know, in this corner of the room or something. There's lots of ways you can kind of shore up that perception database so that it starts to shift to, there's something I can do here. And my work is being respected and valued, and I get a chance to transition. Do you see, Sage, how that all could be built in? Now, of course, you can't just anticipate it all ahead of time. And you're asking this great question. So once the lid is flipped, how do you help them reset? This is where you need to engage with helping bring awareness to their physiological and psychological changes. So like, this is where emotion coaching comes in, which is a part that we're not covering today, but you basically help them to like notice that their lid is flipping and help them find a tool to put the lid back on. And sometimes that it drastically fails until you've practiced outside of the lid flipping moments. Like it just needs to play itself out where he gets to stomp around, and you just hold your boundaries during that time and reassure him that you're there for him once he's done doing what he's doing. That is not so ideal. And then over time, practice in ways that you can handle things like anger or disappointment or frustration without having a harmful impact on the environment and on others. So that's like a whole skill set that we talked about for an entire day and a half in our emotional mastery weekend. But happy to, Sage, hop on a call. I know we haven't spoken in a while, and see how I can support you with your questions. So I can drop a link in for you for that. I have a couple of spots open, and I have many spots open in the spring where we're like talking about folks joining our July cohort. But yeah, this would be a fun time for us to just drop in and check in. Sage, it's been almost a year, I think. Yeah, great to have you here. All right, so lots of options for helping put that lid back on. Not enough time to go over today. If this was helpful to you, give me a little like yes in the chat. And maybe one thing that stood out to you. And I'm going to repeat the main takeaway in a moment, but I'd love to see what you have in your mind now, like going forward. What would you take forward, take away, kind of try next with your child or children? Sarah says, yes, nice, Sarah. Yeah, so glad you're here today for this brief touch-in. Alex says, yes, very helpful. Hi, welcome, Alex. I think we've chatted before, I believe. I'm not totally sure because your last name's not there. But yeah, feel free if you haven't had a session in the last year with me to grab a spot on my calendar, or let me know how we're connected. Okay, yeah, okay, then I thought so. I thought I remembered you. Emily, another client, says very helpful. Excellent. All right, well done, everybody. This is such a fun drop in on Mondays to just kind of reboot you. Those of you who are clients, will see you for a longer form next week for our Q&As. We have 2 hours in the afternoon and an hour and a half in the evening next Wednesday. So I'm looking forward to that and our one-on-one sessions. And I'm just so proud of this cohort. It's just been amazing. Next week, we are taking a break from the Monday Mindset Mondays. And then we'll be back on March 27th for Empathizing Without Giving In. And that's the idea of like, how do you actually be in the moment with a kid and empathize, but you're not like allowing them to continue any kind of destructive behavior or cross lines that shouldn't be crossed. So how do you like hold that line and not give in, but still empathize? So you can look forward to that on March 27th. I'm also going to be having a special event next week on Wednesday at 4 p.m. interviewing Jennifer Cormier, all about healing after loss. And so one of the triggers that can be really sensitive in all of us is if we have unprocessed grief or loss, and that can be loss of a job, loss of an opportunity, loss of a pet, loss of a person, the whole range. She's an excellent expert in grief and healing from grief. And so if you wanted to put that in your calendars, it's next Wednesday at 4 p.m. And we'll be back here, Pacific, and we'll be back here on this link. On a new link that will be announced through the newsletter and through the Facebook group. So we'll see you then, and that'll kind of replace our Monday Mindset next week. All right, Emily. Oh yeah, so good to have you here. Sarah, Sage, Kirsten, Emily, Kat, and Alex. Beautiful work today. You are all becoming or already are embodying being a calm and empowered parent, raising happy, confident, and resilient children. And it's so wonderful to be in community with each and every one of you. Lots of love to you for now. Take care. Bye.